As you sit there watching this video, you probably know exactly what it feels like to have your life not turn out the way you want, even though you're working so hard to create it. Having things like anxiety or stress slowing down the progress of your growth. If you're like most ambitious people, you're probably wondering why you're not happier at this point in your life, even though you've put in all of the effort. Here's the thing, you probably have realized at this point that it takes a lot more than willpower to quiet the inner chaos, to quiet the noise in the head, to quiet all of the unwanted intrusive thoughts, however you want to label what that is for you. Here's what I've realized over the course of several years of doing my own reprogramming and conditioning so I could go from A to B faster and in a way that's aligned and congruent with not only who I am in the moment, but who I want to be in the future. There are several levels to what I'm going to get into in just a moment. And I'm going to explain it all to you in this video so you can then go and use the tools that I've used in order to make the shifts that you want to make in your life as well. Hey guys, my name is Andre, and after over a decade of being a software developer trained in Silicon Valley, I am now transitioning my entire career into something that most people would say is totally different and probably a little crazy. And that's okay. You got to be a little bit crazy. But in that journey, there are all the tools along the way that I've tried, and I was just as frustrated as you might be with things like traditional therapy, meditation, journaling, and all the other conventional wisdom that is out there. So let's get into it. What exactly are the ways that we can change these four levels? Keep on watching this video and let's dive in. So there are four main levels that you need to work through as you progress through your own personal transformation. Because if you're not where you want to be just now, whatever you have in mind for yourself for the future, go ahead and envision that now. Close your eyes if you need to. Envision what you really want your life to be like. And then take a moment and notice how that's different than what you have now. See if you can notice the differences. Those differences are the gap. Those differences are the gap we want to fill to get you from A to B to where you want to go. And in the middle, there's all of the noise, there's all the chaos, there's all the path we think we have to take, the challenge along the way. And it's going to be hard and there's effort and struggle. And all of that is really just a mental construct. So if we take that vision that you had for yourself, that is the highest level. You might call this your highest self, your higher self. You might call this your spiritual calling, God's calling for you. Whatever it is that you want to label that, that is the top bucket. That is your purpose. That is your reason for being here. That is your vision, your highest vision. That is the top level. Let's call that level one. Below level one, we have level two. Level two is the mental level. You use your mind to be able to call that level and kind of experience it for a moment. Level two is your mind, the mental level, where there's the thinking, the prefrontal cortex, the human brain. The human brain is level two because that is where we get our strength and our ability to think and operate in the world the way we do, and sometimes it gets in the way. So if we have level one, and level one is the ideal, the perfect vision, it is unchangeable, not unchangeable, but there's nothing wrong with level one, right? Level one is like, yeah, in my vision, it's perfect. It's a spiritual thing. There's perfection kind of baked into it. Below that perfection doesn't exist. If you haven't learned that lesson, it's one that took me a long time to learn. Perfection doesn't exist below the spiritual level, below the highest self. So we have a mental level, level two, which is imperfect. That's how we can call upon the vision for the higher level. So below the mental level, we have the emotional level. The emotional level, I'm sure you know what your emotions are. Maybe you're like me and have locked them away for a long, long time. If you've locked them away from a long, long time, then there's a blockage in level three, which is the emotional level. But this is where our motivation comes from, our intrinsic ability and energy to move, to act, to do something. A lot of people think anger is bad. Anger is a negative thing. And we usually have that because we have a connotation of someone else being angry at us and towards us in our past. The reality is that it's important to be angry when you need to use anger in your favor. And the places that that is the case is when someone has crossed a boundary of yours. And a lot of my clients, people that I've worked with, they're the nice guy. They don't have boundaries and they're not angry people. That was the same case for me. That was a block that I had in my emotional layer, layer 3. So that is where work needs to be done for some people. Everyone's going to have different levels of blocks, right? And then below the emotional, we have the fourth and the final layer, which is the physical layer. No surprise, that's your physical body. You can touch it, you can feel it. You are here physically in this world, on this planet. The physical body can have its own blocks as well. Health and diet and exercise and all of that conventional stuff is important at this level. And there are other things that are also important that are usually ignored by a lot of people at this level. So, what might those be? Let's start working our way upwards from this pyramid so we can see where the work might need to get done. If your body is unhealthy, starting with level 4, the physical, if your physical body is unhealthy, is not the best word. Let's say unoptimal. If your physical body is suboptimal, then you have a shaky foundation for what you want to do in order for your emotions to flow, really. And then that's going to be an unoptimal, kind of shaky, or in this case, kind of closed off, rigid foundation or environment for your mental level to process the things that you need to in order to achieve your highest goal. Now let's go top down. If you have your highest vision, if there's some kind of block or unalignment in the mental level, then even though you might know what that is, I mean, first of all, if there's so much chaos and misalignment in the mental level, you might not even know what that is. Even if you do know what that is and there's a misalignment, you might choose to ignore it. That was the case for me for a long time. And if you choose to ignore it, that misalignment alone, because you're not in alignment and in path with your calling, with your purpose, your misalignment takes effort to not be in alignment. So there's all this energy kind of distorting the environment in the mental level, in the psyche, and that's going to trickle down, and that's going to cause issues in the emotional level. That's where we start to suppress. That's where we start to have the walls built around our hearts. That's where we start to think that, oh, I'm not supposed to cry because of XYZ reason, using our mental brain. So we shut that down and we suppress our emotional level. And here's the thing I learned about emotions that surprised me. If you block out one emotion, you block out all of them. You can't pick and choose. You can't block out just the negative ones and keep the positive ones like love and joy and happiness. When you block out your emotions, they all go together. And when you block out at the emotional level, it's going to trickle down and you're going to have an impact and you're going to feel an impact and you're going to have dis-ease in the physical level, in the physical body. You might start to stutter. You might get rashes on your skin. You might get all of these things that are inexplainable or just vague to Western belief patterns, Western medicine, for example. There's a lot of things that can show up here. There's a lot of evidence that arthritis, for example, is really just caused by stress. Where is that stress? Mental, trickles down to the emotional, trickles down to the physical. They're probably out of alignment with who they're supposed to be. For me, I started to stutter one day and I said, I don't stutter. What the heck's going on here? I had to start to do the work and work on the physical, the emotional, the mental, and eventually I was able to get up to the spiritual as well. And so there's this trickle down effect, and there's it's not a trickle up effect, but we'll just call it a trickle up effect also. So there's two ways you can work. And so what I want to explain in this video now is what are the tools to use at which levels, because I've tried to work on using the best tools. I had to discover some of those for myself. And part of my career change is in delivering those tools for people that might not otherwise know to look for them. And so I want to explain what they are, what some of them are in this video so that you can go ahead and do some research, start to learn them on your own, and really start to transform your own life. So, in order to do this effectively, I want to talk about the common thread between all four levels. Now, the higher self, the spiritual, you might see that being a little bit disconnected from the bottom three because it's a very abstract concept. You know, you might look up for the spiritual, people point to the sky when they think of God. But really, that's something that's always around you all the time. It's not a hierarchical thing, but it's a dimension away. It's a dimension separate from where we are now, right? From the physical and from like our mental and our emotional. And in the similar way, our mind, our mental level is a dimension away from the emotional. The mind thinks in language for most of us. It thinks logically, if then there's always something going on, right? The mind is always on, always running, especially for those of us with the monkey mind and the negative intrusive thoughts, right? This is where they show up. And so there's always something going on here. And that's a dimension away from the emotional level. The emotional level is emotion, energy in motion. That's what this level is, the emotional level, level three. And it's always running through your body, but you're not always experiencing an emotion, right? You're just in some kind of state, but you don't always have some emotion running through. You're not always crying or always sad, right? Or angry. You're not always one of those things. There's always like there's gaps, and that's fine. And so that's kind of a dimension away from the mental, which is only, strictly in the head, the thinking and all of that. And the emotional is another dimension away from the physical, but it's a little bit closer because the emotions run through the physical body. And the physical body is a physical thing. Emotions are not a physical thing. They're less fleeting, maybe, than a thought that you might have. There's more of a full body experience, but it's still not the body, if that makes sense. And so, with all of those differences, you might be wondering, what is the common thread between these? And here's why this is important. The common thread is important because when you know the common thread, you can find the best tools to use along that thread, and all of the levels can start to get affected simultaneously because of how close they are to each other in the thing that connects them. If you work on each one individually, this is the Western medicine approach. We treat the body as parts. We treat symptoms and conditions as a standalone thing. We don't consider the holistic approach, the holistic human that's sitting in front of me. So if you start to work on just the mind or just the emotion or just the physical body, there's going to be a gap in your progress. You can still make progress, and you will, and you've probably experienced that in your life already. I bet you've done a great job at that. As you start to work on the thread that aligns or that connects all of them, and when you work on that thing, you're going to have much better results, a much better impact on all of the levels at the same time. You're going to be saving time, saving money. You're going to be much more efficient, much more effective in your personal growth. And this is what most people miss. So, what is it? What is this thing? The simple answer to what this is and how to work on it is energy, the energy that connects everything in the universe. It connects the spiritual to the physical, it's the bridge. Energy is, as we said, with emotion, right? Energy and motion is an emotion. Thoughts are also energy and motion. They're just in the brain instead of the body with words attached to them. The body, the physical body, we already talked about how emotions are energy. The key aspect here, though, is that emotions can also be trapped in the body. They can be trapped. And so there's trapped energy and then there's flowing energy. And the flowing energy is when you experience joy, anger, laughter, sadness. And they can be trapped and not flowing, but stuck and bundled up. And the physical body is also, of course, not only made of energy, it is kind of the conduit for energy. It is the antenna where we pick up um, waves, like radio waves almost, of energy that we can sense. If you ever sense someone's watching me, or you think of someone and they text you, those kinds of things. The physical body is kind of the medium, the touch screen where we start to experience and interact with the energy. So let's talk about the tools. Those are the four different aspects, the four different bodies, you might say, and they're all connected via the medium of energy. The tool of energy exists along all four of those mediums. So, how do we start implementing this, and what tools do we need to use to start pulling this into our own life? Because of the connection between the physical and the emotional and the mental, and the mental and the spiritual, when you work on one, you're kind of working on the connection between that and the next one. It's kind of like if you have a rubber band and you have this tension, and the tension is like the gap, right? The tension is unwanted, undesirable, it's suboptimal. If we release the tension on one side of the rubber band, this side is also going to lessen in the amount of tension that it has. That's just the way it works, right? That's just physics. Because they're connected, when one side lets go a little bit and loosens, the other side is also going to let go and loosen at the same time. That's why working on the connection between them is so important and so effective. So it's important to get down to the lowest common denominator, which we've said is energy. So for the physical level, the thing that connects the physical level and the emotional level energetically is the nervous system. And the nervous system runs through every part of your body, and every cell is somehow connected to the nervous system. It's the conduit for energy running through your body. So to better improve, rather than talking to someone for an hour once a week, or sitting there meditating, just focusing on the breath, I found it more productive to do energy work on myself, which was a nervous system regulating type of modality. You can go to a sauna and cold plunge. You can do the contrast therapy, they call it. It is fantastic. I love it. You can do breath work. You can do something like acupuncture, for example. Of course, exercise and diet is important, but those are macro things. You're moving energy on a macro scale rather than on the, I don't want to say atomic, but at the energetic level rather than the macro physical level, which is exercise. So things that are nervous system based, nervous system focused, somatic exercises, things like my MindWorks program, those exist at this level. Very, very powerful. There are things that you can do yourself. There are things you might need someone to do for you or on you. And that is what I would recommend for the physical. So, somatic nervous system exercises, my MindWorks program, for example, very, very powerful at the physical level, the physical emotional bridge. Also, the things like network spinal analysis or the somatic energy table work, which I'm also learning, exist really in all levels because it's energy directly. But again, it has to do with the body. And then there's the emotional mental level. And what is that bridge there? This is where people, I believe, why people go to things like therapy, because they want to they're in their head, they want to break through and be more open and flowing and emotional. And it just doesn't happen because you can't really use the mind to break through in that way. And so the core here, that the tool here, things that you've learned down in the physical emotional can be effective, and they can have an impact on the emotional and physical, emotional, mental, and they will. They 100% will. There might come a time, which I've experienced recently, where you start to realize there's something else that I need and I don't quite know what it is. It's out of my awareness. That piece is the unconscious mind or the subconscious mind, because a lot of the bottom layers will drive the unconscious mind, and that's what actually drives the conscious mind. It's not just the emotions, it's the subconscious, it's the unconscious mind that lies in between. And so anything you can use to start to reprogram and rewire that subconscious mind, that is what's going to help with the energetic connection between emotional and mental. And that can be things like hypnosis, things like neurolinguistic programming, things like powerful visualizations. This is where it's not just physically focused like the more somatic things. You're tapping into the subconscious mind, which is connecting the two levels. And when you shift things and you move something from a disempowered representation to a bright, full color representation, it changes things in a way you really can't explain until you experience it. Because that level of the subconscious mind is so untapped. And it's we're only using 10% of our brain at most at any given time. There is so much going on behind the scenes, and a big part of that is the physical somatic, and a big part of that is the unconscious. So things like hypnosis, things like neurolinguistic programming, things that get into your psyche a level below where you're normally operating, that's going to help with that bridge. Now let's get into the levels 1 and 2 and the energetic bridge between these. What is the thing that ties these two together? What you want to do to start working on the 1 and 2 is you have to decide differently. You have to make different choices, because a lot of us at some point we knew who we were. And you realize that your choices are what deviated you from that path, because we've been conditioned. The conditioning exists in the unconscious mind, the conditioning exists in the nervous system, in the somatic level. So as you undo the conditioning at those levels, it becomes easier to make different choices. And as you go through life, we tend to deviate from our highest self, from our calling, from our passion, whatever that is. And we start to live this life instead, somebody else's life, somebody else's values, somebody else's expectations for who we should be. As you start to let go of the things that made you make that decision in the first place, you can then start to bring it back. And as you start to bring it back, it's going to be something you've never done before. And so, how do you get closer to that state? One of the best things people do is they visualize. And another way, or another tool that people visualize with, and as they do that, is manifesting. You start to manifest that future into you now. You start to manifest those changes. And those are the most powerful things that some of the best people in the world do, the most successful people in the world do. They've done the somatic work where at a certain level, they're good. Their unconscious mind is on their side, working for them rather than against them. And they know how to call into their higher self to manifest by visualizing who they want to be in a pretty exquisite detail. And with all of those things, you can work your way in either direction, wherever you need to do the work, whichever body, higher self, mental, emotional, physical, wherever you need to do the work, those are the tools to use. So if you need the somatic work, you could take my program. You could go find some online somatic exercises. You could do anything that's going to take you a step in that direction. Try some acupuncture, for example, something like that. If you know you need the work of the unconscious mind, find a coach who knows what they're doing. Find someone who can do some powerful hypnosis, or someone who can do some type of NLP. And if all of that stuff is good and you're just a little out of congruence, you just got to start deciding differently and start to master the art of manifesting and visualizing. And you're going to call that into your life. It's been a powerful journey for me to realize this over the years. And if you've made it this far in the video, you're clearly looking for something. You're looking for something more. You're looking for a better future for maybe not just for yourself, but for those you care about. And that is a very important and very powerful calling to listen to. And it takes courage to do that. So I want to thank you for watching this video. And I cannot wait to see where you are a month from now, a year from now. Go ahead and drop a comment below if this resonated. And I will see you in the next video.